I thought, well, let's build a community around it in like a private Facebook group. And let's just make it really, really high quality members and really, really high quality conversation.
Welcome back to the Talking Web Marketing Podcast with myself, Ilana Wexler. This is a show where we reveal the best tips, tricks and tactics to increasing your website traffic and then converting that traffic into leads and sales. We also discuss what's working right now in the ever-changing world of web marketing so you can apply it to your business. Welcome to today's episode of Talking Web Marketing. We're up to episode number 28, and I am your host, Ilana Wexler. And today I am introducing a guest called Matt Jones, who was formerly a plumber, and he decided that he would not pursue the traditional path of plumbers and took a bit of a left turn as he noticed that there were a lot of other agencies that weren't taking care of trade-based businesses in any way. So that led him to start his own digital agency called Tradie Web Guys, which obviously provide digital solutions for trade people. And he also has a podcast called The Site Shed. So I invited him on today's show to talk about really how he built the agency and the podcast. And one of the key aspects that he has done to do this is a free Facebook group. So it's a little bit contentious because some people don't agree with Facebook groups and some people love them. But I invited Matt on to talk about his experience with it and I guess the common pitfalls that people fall into with Facebook groups and the way he's been sort of really successful in doing so. So welcome to today's show, Matt Jones.
Thank you for having me.
It's lovely to have you on. I always like to talk to people who have a very interesting background and work in different kind of niches. So can you kind of start by telling us a little bit about yourself, your background, and the industry you work in now?
Sure. My background is actually plumbing. I used to be a plumber. Well, I still am a plumber, I suppose.
I didn't know that.
I still have the ticket. Don't use it very well. You probably wouldn't want me fixing your plumbing these days. It's been a long time since I've been out of the game. But yeah, that's where it all got started. I grew up in Sydney, Australia. And like a lot of kids, I suppose, going through the academic system, I realised that I probably wasn't what you would consider the academic type of student. Therefore, coming up to, that life-changing decision where you're like, okay, what am I going to do for the rest of my life when you're 16, which is ridiculous. I thought I want to do a trade. I want to be a tradie. So I was working with a mechanics, which was like a part-time job after school and stuff when I was younger. And one of the mechanics there, his brother was a plumber. And I don't know why, for some reason, and my best friend, he still reckons that I said this when I was in kindergarten, when you write down what you want to be when you grow up, apparently I wrote down plumber. So,
really?
Yeah, I don't know what the deal is with that. One of my good friends, his dad was a plumber, so maybe I thought it was cool. But anyway, it so happens I reached this mechanic father and he said, got a young guy here who's pretty keen on doing an apprenticeship. You reckon you'd like to have a chat with him or, whatever? And he said, yeah, absolutely. Send him down, and basically within a week I had a job, and I came home and said, Mum, I got an apprenticeship. She was like, Jesus, that didn't take long. I've only been out of school, I think, 3 minutes. Yeah, so I started my apprenticeship and I loved it, to be honest. I really enjoyed the apprenticeship. I enjoyed the trade. I enjoyed the customer interaction, all this kind of stuff. And then I did what most young Australians do. I finished my TAFE course and I packed my bags and took off around the world for 3 years. And while I was away, I was doing a number of things in various countries. Plumbing was one of them in the United Kingdom and Canada and America. And I just realized that as much as I liked it, I kind of felt like it was a little bit, I was kind of stuck. I was working for some massive companies in the United Kingdom and you were literally just a number. And it was kind of disheartening. I really enjoyed the work, but I thought that, the structure's a bit wrong. So I started taking an interest in business while I was away and reading lots of business books. And when I came back to Australia, I thought I'm just going to start my own business. So the classic example here and this is very common in the trades, you go and do your apprenticeship, you serve your time, and you may be very good at the trade, but you have no idea how to run a business. So I came back, set up my own business, and I didn't have anything in order. I didn't have any idea how to, put tax aside and all that kind of stuff. So I ended up in all this debt with the ATO and all this, stuff that is just stupid and frowned upon. You look back on it and you think, you really needed a mentor, which is exactly what I needed. I really needed someone who could teach me how to run a business. It wasn't the case. Sort of learnt through the school of hard knocks there. And I ended up, anyway, after a while, I got screwed over by a builder, as many people have been, and I lost a fair bit of money in that. So I got offered this position, which was a sales and marketing role. And I was like, oh, this is great. And that was actually through, at that time, a guy I had that was mentoring me. And he said, there's this job with one of my clients. Would you be interested? And I was like, yes, actually, that'd be great. So it was a sales and marketing job. I jumped at it because I thought, this is a good chance for me here to, to learn how business works, to learn this whole, organizational structure and, all this kind of stuff. What I didn't know at that point, of course, was that by taking that job, I would not only be learning, what works, I would be learning more of what doesn't work.
Equally important, I'd say.
And so, I took that position and it was a really good experience. But then I sort of got fed up with archaic processes and archaic systems. And I've always been quite technology minded. And, when you're working in organizations with dinosaurs, it becomes a bit tedious. So,
yeah.
Anyway, at the end of the day, we were basically working with plumbers, and we had a lot of clients. We were selling high ticket products to them around Asia Pacific, and they'd come back and say, hey, listen, if we don't start selling some of this stuff you've sold us, we're going to be sleeping in the trailer that we just bought off you. So I said, well, you got to get it on your website. They said, well, we don't have a website. And I was like, well, you better get one. And they're like, how do I do that? And I was like, I'll look after it for you. So I ended up building a couple of these guys' websites, and then they spoke to friends, and friends spoke to friends, and then it just started growing. So as a result, I ended up leaving that job, and I went about that all wrong as well, I might add. I sort of basically threw the towel in and said, woo, I'm out of here, because I hated it at that stage. So I pretty much did everything wrong and ended up starting the business. And that was, 7 or 8 years ago now. So
that business is what's become the Tradie Web Guys, yeah?
Yeah, that's right. So it was Tradie Web Guys, and it actually started as plumbing web guys. We just did websites for plumbing companies. But then after a while, very, very early in the piece, that morphed to Tradie Web Guys.
So for our listeners who don't know, that is essentially a web agency for trade people. Yeah? Yeah,
more or less. We just do digital solutions. So we do websites, and we do some like marketing strategies, and mainly in the space of a lot of content related stuff. So we do a lot of things that tie back to the website as the platform. So landing page creation, content creation, on page SEO, all that kind of stuff. And then recently we've been moving a little bit more towards the paid marketing side of things. But yeah, that's effectively all we do. We just work with trade businesses, and we just help them establish a foundation that will facilitate scale. So we just try to avoid that scenario for our clients where, and we get it all the time because people come to us, almost weekly with, websites that they've had built 18 months ago, and they want to, do something to it, and we have to rebuild the whole thing in order to enable it. So we just try and avoid that for them.
And I like the fact that you've chosen, your vertical, because I think there's a huge amount of power in that. It makes it very easy for people to refer you work because you guys are experts in the trades. But I would imagine it'd be quite tempting to then maybe go to hairdressers or something, or sort of expand out a little bit. Have you kind of had that where you've been tempted to kind of go into a different vertical?
Yeah, I mean, trades, if a hairdresser's a trade, by the way,
I know, but that's why I said it, where it's like, it is a trade, but does it fit in your plumbers, electricians, there's always that grey area, which is like this carrot that's dangled in front of you to test how much you're going to stick to your knitting,
I mean, look, at the end of the day, so I've niched myself as the expert towards trades, and that is where we focus all of our marketing, all of our attention. We don't do any marketing outside of that. Now, of course, as a result, through friends and colleagues and things like that, we will get people inquiring, hey, can you help us do a website, blah, 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 things like that. So we have done websites for companies that are not trade specific. At the end of the day, small business is pretty similar across the board. And so the principles and the applications that would apply to a lot of those businesses correlate, across vertical. So we have done other businesses that are not trades, but we just don't focus any of our marketing attention on that.
Okay. That's interesting. So since you mentioned marketing, let's kind of talk into how you've managed to market your agency, because you have built a really, really big agency. So credit to that. That's an amazing achievement.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's really, really big.
Really? Well, you don't put yourself down. That's so Aussie to do. Like having built an agency myself, one of the best sources of getting clients is referrals, but it's very hard to scale referrals. You can't really, once they're exhausted, that's it really. So beyond referrals, how have you managed to really build up that lead generation side for your business?
It's funny, because I'd say probably today still our main source of especially qualified customers or qualified leads come from referrals. So we've got, and to be honest with you, very few of them come from customers. Tradies are quite hard for some reason to get them to refer friends and colleagues and whatnot. Well, it does happen, but not a lot. So a lot of we've built a really strong referral network, and we've got a lot of strategic partners, a lot of strategic alliances. We do a lot of referral work between each other's organizations. We've done that from the beginning. I mean, that was like the best low budget way for us to get work. So that worked really well. And then we found as well, when we're talking about, say, cold outreach or, trying to do your own marketing and getting leads in, yeah, it would work. But when you're talking from a conversion perspective, like obviously, as you just said, the amount of conversions we were getting when it was coming through a referred lead was far greater than the conversions we were getting off, say, paid ads, for example. So it kind of got me thinking as well, like when I was so earlier in the piece with Tradie Web Guys, we were going down that path of, we were investing quite a lot in educating because I believe then, and I still believe now, if you can empower people or your industry with knowledge and I suppose a basic understanding of the fundamentals of various, I suppose, things that you might provide. So, for example, us, we invest quite heavily in educating our clients on how they can update their own websites and how they can create content and how they can, create on-page SEO-friendly content and all this kind of stuff. And we don't do that because we think that they're not busy. We do it because we want them to be in a position where if they have the resource, they can facilitate it themselves and they don't have to feel like they're completely dependent on us. Second part is, you're equipping them with the knowledge or a basic understanding of if they do want to outsource it, they know what to ask and they know what to be looking for in that scenario. So it's like a double-edged sword, really. Like a lot of people think we're nuts because we give so much away, but at the end of the day, it's not for us so much about, information is everywhere today. We're in the information age. People can get information to things. So we figure if we can provide that information, it makes us look good. And it puts them in a position where, they can learn a new skill if they want that will typically correlate to many businesses. And then if they want help with it, we can help them with it. So it's basically giving them the option as opposed to saying, well, this is it, do it or don't. Like we sort of like give them a bit more of an option in that decision-making process. So where was I going with that? Oh, yeah. So we started educating and, like I was speaking at, Department of Education down in Canberra at the roundtable events and all this kind of stuff, and then TAFE New South Wales. And I thought, this is really good. Like, I was getting a lot of good feedback from that, but it was kind of micro. Like, you could only really reach the people that were in the room or that were at the event. And so I was thinking, how can you make this more of a macro model where you can really get this information that people are actually telling us they're benefiting from? How can we get this out to the masses? So February of 2016, I launched the Site Shed. And the Site Shed from the get-go is basically a business platform where trade business owners can come and get resources, information, tools, join a network, all that kind of stuff that's relevant to the industry. So that started as, and still is today, a business podcast for tradies. And you can get hold of that across anywhere you listen to podcasts, really. It's the leading business podcast for trade businesses in Australia, and it's growing very rapidly in the US, which is kind of cool.
That's awesome.
And so basically we just talk about business-related things there. I get lots of amazing guests on the show because no one wants to listen to me, but they certainly want to listen to the people that we get on there because there's some extremely smart business owners from around the world and industry experts that specialise in different areas that relate to the trades. And so now we're 160 odd episodes in. I think we've recorded 172 or something. So we've backlogged pretty fair bit as well. So yeah, it's going really well.
So the goal of the podcast is obviously to feed your agency with leads. Is that right?
It's sort of twofold. It's got to the point now where the podcast has sort of become its own business. And I don't mean that necessarily from a monetary perspective at this point. However, there is some things that I can't talk about because I'm under an NDA.
Oh,
But,
wow. I'm curious now.
Yeah, there's a lot of cool stuff that's coming up with that, which is going to be really good. So initially it was a way that we could educate the masses, and if they needed digital solutions, we could fly that flag for them. And it still does work as that as well, I might add. So we get a lot of leads that come through the podcast. We run, I run promotions at the beginning of the podcast on things that we're doing. So that might be,
for example,
websites. It could be events we've got coming up. We run these crazy events all over the world where we take people skiing, and we run business workshops and surf trips and all this kind of stuff. So we've been doing that for quite a while,
right.
Which is fun. And so anything like that we promote through the podcast, and then that typically drives us traffic and leads, and eventually customers.
That's awesome. So you put that in the intro with some kind of
Yep.
promo, and obviously the promotion ends by a certain date. Is that correct?
For events, I mean, you've got to get things booked up. So you can only take so many on an event, and to be honest with you, you only want to take so many as well. It gets pretty hard to manage after when you get too many people in there. So it's very often a case of less is often more. Yeah, no, it's good. They're small events, and they're really sort of targeted towards a certain topic which we teach, and we do it in a way that enables us to ski during the day, and we do a business workshop in the afternoon, or surf during the day and business workshops in the afternoon. And yeah, it's awesome. A lot of fun. Yeah.
So before we hit record, you mentioned that you also have a free Facebook community. How are you managing to get people into that community? Is there some kind of like funnel? And I guess second fold to the question is, what is the point of the Facebook community?
So the reality is, and this is kind of by design as well, I might add, when I was sort of thinking, how can we reach more qualified customers? And I think there's a big disconnect between people getting so caught up in traffic that they neglect qualified traffic as a massive variable. And when I was sort of brainstorming, before we launched the site shed and all that kind of stuff, I was thinking, well, how can we, who are our best type of customers typically? Who are the ones that, understand, they're willing to pay the money, they want to learn, who are these people? And so it was sort of at the time when podcasting was sort of kicking off and getting, starting to become a bit more popular. And I thought, well, typically people that listen to podcasts are people that have a little bit tech savvy. So they kind of, not like tech wizards, but they,
Sure.
They've figured out how to get it on their phone, or, connected to their car or whatever it is. They can typically, they're willing to invest in education, and albeit that at that point, it's a time investment, but, time is a commodity. So, and I thought that's a good qualifier for us. So that's why we launched, I suppose, the podcast to a degree, because, I mean, if I was to look at statistics about, the amount of tradies around the world that listen to podcasts, you'll probably find that far more of them will watch a YouTube video. The type of person, the type of business that we wanted to attract wasn't that type. The type of business that I wanted to attract was somebody that was far more invested in education, a bit more in technology and that kind of thing.
So it's quite intentional.
Yeah, it was by design. So, yeah, when we talk about off the bat, so we had, some products and some, some courses and things like that we were selling, and we were driving people into a webinar through Facebook ads.
Yep.
And
how was that performing?
Yeah, I mean, look, it was, well, statistically, it was performing far better than all of our peers. Like we sort of set this up within a group, and we were all comparing stats and that kind of thing, and ours were caning it. But I think that was largely due to the targeting aspect on Facebook. So, where some guys were spending, $200 to get someone to watch a webinar, we were spending $100, which is still a lot of money. And it doesn't, of course, mean that you've got a sale. All it means is, okay, now you've got them in a sales funnel.
Yes.
So, from there we would stick them into a funnel, and we'd educate and nurture, and, we basically put them through like to start that education process, because it was a relatively high ticket course too. Like when these guys were paying, $5,000 plus for this course, so it wasn't like a small thing. It's not like a $99 course and off you go. So it was going okay, but I was like, I don't know, I just felt like we were getting so many people that would click on, watch half a webinar, and we tried all different formats, and we tried different time like lengths for the webinars and all this kind of stuff and different content. And it just felt like it kind of felt way too salesy for me. And I wasn't really that comfortable with it. And I think being a tradie myself, it was pissing me off. I was like, I wouldn't watch this. Why would anyone else watch this? I had that kind of attitude.
And that's where, like, the fact that you are your target audience to some degree,
right.
You had that extra, insight to go, well, this is just not my industry, So yeah, I can imagine, like, the noise in the market from the IM internet marketing gurus saying, you got to be this, you got to be that, but then it's like a mismatch in your industry.
It's exactly right. And it sort of leads into what we're about to talk about now with community, right? So obviously you and I met within a networking community in Sydney, and the fellow that runs that preaches a lot about
authenticity.
Well, no, well, yeah, yes, definitely, but when we're talking about communities, having membership sites and all this kind of stuff. And I went down. It was funny because I was at the point where we'd set up this program or this course, and it was basically on a membership site effectively, and we were about to kick off the forum side of things. And I sat back and I had a look at it, and I thought, this is retarded. Like, I was in this group, and I would never, ever, ever jump into that forum. I just would never log in, and I just couldn't for the life of me understand how people had the time to sit in this membership site all day and just post comments. And I just couldn't for the life of me understand how it worked. And then I thought, there's something in this. Like, I am not the right audience for this group, and I am my customer at the end of the day, and I know my customers are going to be, it's far easier for them to commit to something like a Facebook community than it is to a membership site, because they just won't be there. I just know they won't be there.
And then you're going to have engagement issues. Exactly
right. So, I built a bit of a strategy around, and, we did a bit of research on it as well. And I thought, look, what the hell, at the end of the day, like, either I invest heavily in building my own membership site, which I'm not convinced by any measure is going to work, because there's been a couple of people in the industry who would try to do similar things and they all just fizzed. And then I thought, well, why don't I try doing this doing it on Facebook? It's not going to cost me anything. Well, it'll cost me something, but considerably less. And at least I know that I've got, I can target my audience from there, and I can reach out to people and I can get them in. And so we built a bit of a strategy around, because we already had the podcast, and the podcast was, becoming very well known, like both here and abroad. I thought, well, let's build a community around it in like a private Facebook group, and let's just make it really, really high quality members and really, really high quality conversation. And so, there's a lot, especially in the trades, and I mean, I'm sure a lot of your listeners would not be familiar, but trust me, there's a lot of crap out there, like these groups, and they basically just sledge the hell out of each other, and it's pretty vulgar. And we didn't want any of that, so we've put together a bit of a policy for letting people in. People that come in, they have to answer questions. And as I said to you yesterday, we actually block more people than we let into the group. So because we only want qualified people in there, we want the qualified conversations that we're having to be, that we want it to stay and maintain a standard.
And that's your duty as a community organizer, is to set a precedent and maintain that level of quality.
Well, I would agree with that, but then I've never seen a group that actually does it apart from ours. Like I mean, especially in the trades, like it's just crap. So yeah, so that was part of the deal, and we set it up like that, and then basically people that come into that community, they have the option there if they want to sign up for a bot, or if they want to go into if they want to be sent information. If they want to be sent information, they go into our newsletter, which goes out weekly. So then we can educate them more, and we can recap on things like podcasts and all that kind of stuff. We basically is adding value. It's almost like a curation, if you will. And so so that community has been running for a long time now, and the feedback we get from it is just phenomenal. Like, there's people like, I just can't believe the value that comes out of this group. And it's by design. We've got the right experts in there. We've got the right people, type of business owners in there. And I mean, we boot a lot of people out of there. Like even yesterday, there was some guy dropping, C bombs and F bombs, and I just, I didn't even warn him. I just punted him straight out of the group. Like I just don't have the time and the energy. It's too much engagement in that group to have to worry about that sort of people. So yeah, I just screenshot it and sent it to my social manager and just said, here, this is what I've done. And she's like, no worries.
Wow.
So
have you the risk obviously with the Facebook group, it's, that it's on a platform you don't own and control, and, Zuckerberg can, hit with a strike of it, whatever. Have you kind of added some level of insurance with that? Like, have you got people's email addresses so that if, okay.
I mean, well, look, as I said to you before, we say, would you like to receive information on blah, 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 whatever it is? And if they do, then, we stick them in the newsletter. But it's all good in theory, and I get that, the whole, and I've always preached this to people, and I still preach it to people today. If you're gonna invest in things and, have some sort of control over it. And I especially relate that back to websites, like you see, when clients go and post, these huge pieces or, effectively blogs on their Facebook page. I'm like, guys, you're doing this wrong. Like, this should live on your website, and you should be posting a link to Facebook, sending people back to your website, that kind of thing. Yeah. But when we're talking about community, again, it just comes back to that analysis we did in the early stages. Like, you got to be realistic about where your customers are. So, I mean, if I was targeting mortgage brokers, I probably wouldn't have a huge success on a Facebook, or maybe I would. I don't know. But you probably find you'd have a better hit rate, with a LinkedIn group or something like that. So it just comes back to where you think your customers are going to be and what's going to get the best engagement. I mean, I just know, the quality of people that we've got in that group, and they don't pay to be in there, but we pay for them to be in there. So we run, Facebook ads that drive people into a free community. So, when you're comparing that to the webinars that we were running earlier in the piece, we were paying, say, $100 per viewer of the webinar, which was good. And then now, we're getting people into a free community for, under 30 cents. So
wow, it's difference in cost per conversion, isn't it?
Well, I mean, yeah, you got to think about as well the offer there, right? So when you're trying to sell people into a webinar, like, they know you're going to be pitching something at the end of it. When you're selling people into a free community, they're joining a free community. So it's not like it's the hardest barrier of entry, So that was kind of by design as well. How can we make this easy for people to get in? And then if they want information or if they want services and all that kind of stuff, then, that's available for them in there. But we find it works better to do it that way than go for the hard sell and then try to nurture, because typically what happens is if you start with that big sell, you'll typically lose them. And
I get that.
Whereas if you start with, education, nurturing, and just, the community, then they'll appreciate that. And if something pops up they need, then we can volunteer it. So
do you have any idea of those kind of stats, like the conversion from the group to some kind of sale of some degree? Do you have any idea of that lead time and if those leads do convert?
Yeah, not really, to be honest with you. Probably something that actually, it's a conversation I had with my manager only 2 weeks ago, and I said we're going to start putting a bit more effort into that, and just analysing and reaching out to these group members. It just as well, it comes down to resource. Like, when you're running a community that's really, really engaged, it does take quite a bit of time, and it does take quite a bit of vetting. And
that was my next question, actually. Like, how much time do you find it takes to manage this group?
I don't spend a lot of time in there, but I mean, Talia, she spends a lot of time in there. So that's basically her job. She mediates the group. She qualifies the people that are in there. It's funny now as well. Like, initially, it was up to us to sort of come up with questions and start conversations. But now that it's more established, we find that we don't even have to post stuff. Like, people will just come in there and they ask questions, and then next minute there's a thread of 150 comments that all tie back, from business owners all across the globe that have had experiences with that area. I mean, that's better feedback than we could ever give. Like, you've got a collaborative group of people here that are willing to, invest and share their experience. So it's at the point where it kind of fuels itself from content perspective, which is great, because then as a result, when we see a really active thread and we see a really, engaged conversation, then I can take that and I can extract that into a podcast and I can do an episode on it and get an expert on the show. And you know what I mean? Like, it sort of gives me content leverage.
So I can see it's kind of like it all feeds into each other. The podcast, I'm sure, feeds into the community feeds back to the podcast. They're all kind of linked in some degree.
It's all very incestuous.
So what kind of Facebook ads have you tried, or is that probably not a question for you, because since you might not do that?
Yeah, I don't really do a lot of it, but when we've run image ads with long copy, we've run image ads with short copy, we've tried different types of images. And to be honest with you, like I look at the ads that we've created and I just think, my God, they're just so crap. Like, I just don't like them. But then you got to, as I keep getting told, it's not about you, Matt. You got to look at what's working. So yeah. I sort of try and swallow my pride when it comes to those sort of things.
I have to do that on a daily basis. Like I say to people all the time, I'm constantly humbled online. Things that I think will work don't, and things that I think will just be terrible, kill it. Like, because I'm not the target audience, so you have to leave your ego in the other room,
Yeah, we were doing some. It's funny as well. Like for the life, it drives me crazy. Like, you look at last couple of weeks, we've had to draw some statistics from the podcast just in relation to what's the most popular content, all this kind of stuff. And to be honest with you, I kind of find with podcasts, it's very hard to gauge what's most popular purely based off listens and downloads, because I don't know about you, but I subscribe to, say, a handful of podcasts, not a lot. By the way, there's only a few of them I listen to. So, say for example, the Tim Ferriss podcast or whatever it is. Yep. I listen to that podcast when it comes out, every week. So, whether or not it's a good what I would consider an amazing podcast, or if it's a good podcast, or if it's not so great, I still listen to it. So, I feel like if you're trying to gauge, how good your content is based off a download or a listen, it's not very accurate. So, we try and we draw more of our stats out of communication and content that's come from within the community based around the topics within that group. And then a lot of the content for the podcast now, as I just said, is kind of fueled by those conversations as well. So we know that it's going to get better engagement, because it's almost like you're getting I'm getting the community to buy in to the content that we are creating, so they sort of feel like they're invested in it. And we'll do things as well, within the community, where I'll say, hey guys, we've got this episode coming up on finance. You've all wanted to know about equipment finance and vehicle finance. I'm getting this fellow on the show to talk about it. What are some of the questions you want asked? And it makes them buy into it a little bit more. And then when you're actually recording the podcast, you can say, hey, this was a question from Alana. She wanted to know a little bit more about interest rates, and it just makes them feel like they've invested, and they are, to be fair. Like, they've basically, it's those comments that have really led to the creation of that podcast, which is good for everyone.
Yeah, that's awesome. Cool. All right. Well, I think that pretty much covers everything, unless I've forgotten something that I should have asked you.
Yeah, I think that pretty much wraps it up. I think at the end of the day, as we said before, it's not really, like, lead generation is super important, but what's more important is qualified lead generation.
Totally.
And if people can just make that paradigm shift from that whole churn and burn mentality, where they're like, I need more customers, I need more leads, I need more listens, I need more downloads, and all this kind of stuff, like, that doesn't necessarily reflect success. And you see it all the time. I mean, you listen to, there's a lot of podcasts out there that, their strategy is to create as many as possible, and you go and listen to them and they're crap, and you think, why? What's the point? Like, I'd rather listen to one good podcast a month from this person that they've, put time into preparing than, 3 a week, because it's all garbage. So
quality over quantity any day.
Yeah, but I think it correlates as well into, everything, like the community you're managing or the community you're building. It correlates into the language you use on, across your marketing or whatever it is, your education. And it really, like, I can tell you now, like, I'd rather have a group of 100 really qualified, keen, positive people than, 10,000 tire kickers that are just there to sledge and, just take the piss and not add any value,
Yeah.
So, But if you look at that from a statistical point of view and you're saying, oh, okay, well, and that's often the question you get, well, how many people are in your group and how many downloads you get and all this stuff, it doesn't really matter. Like, it's not about that. And I think people get too caught up in these things. And, especially when you're targeting a specific vertical, like it's never really relevant, because if you wanted to go for mass numbers, you would not be targeting a specific vertical. You would just go the shotgun approach and see what sticks. But when you're really trying to build a tight knit community, then that niching approach and that qualification process becomes so relevant. And when you compare it to what else is available in the marketplace, it becomes a differentiator. Like, it makes you stand out.
Yeah, I think that's really, really sound advice. Matt, thank you so much for coming on today's show. It sounds like you're doing some awesome work in your space, and I love the fact that you've chosen a vertical, and obviously killing it in your vertical. So well done. That's awesome.
Thank you. Thanks for having.
Yeah, thanks for coming on, and we'll talk to you soon.
All right. Ciao, ciao.
Ciao. You have been listening to the Talking Web Marketing podcast. For more information or resources on today's episode, head on over to talkingwebmarketing.com.